I moved into what I thought was a quiet, peaceful suburban neighborhood to escape the chaos of city life. A cul-de-sac with well-kept lawns, a small neighborhood park, friendly dog walkers, and families grilling on weekends. It looked like paradise on paper, and for the first few weeks, it felt like it too. I was settling in, planting hydrangeas in the front yard, painting the shutters a fresh deep blue, even hanging some string lights around the back patio for cozy evenings. Everything seemed perfect until I met Karen. She lived 2 houses down, a perfectly manicured yard, bright white shutters, not a leaf out of place, and the coldest smile I've ever seen. I first encountered her during my second week, when she rang my doorbell to inform me that my trash bins were visible from the street on a non-trash day and that it was against neighborhood aesthetic standards. I laughed it off politely, apologized, and moved the bins. But it didn't stop there. A few days later, I received my first HOA notice. Violation: unapproved flower bed edging. Yes, the same edging I'd used in my last 2 homes. Confused, I went to the HOA's online portal and saw the complaint was filed anonymously. Still, I complied, removed the edging, and shrugged it off as overregulation. A week later, another complaint arrived, this time about my porch light being too bright and disruptive to neighbors. Then it was my grass being half an inch too long. Then my dog barking twice in the morning. Then my car's back bumper sticking 1 inch onto the sidewalk. It became a weekly barrage of bizarre, nitpicky violations. I soon realized that none of my other neighbors were dealing with this level of scrutiny. In fact, my neighbor directly across the street had solar lights brighter than mine and garden edging even more dramatic than what I had removed. So why was I the target? Suspicion began to take root when I noticed that Karen, who seemed to hover near her windows and patrol the sidewalk at odd times, was always somehow around when these violations occurred. Then one morning, I found a note taped to my door saying that my wind chime was too loud and ruining the neighborhood's tranquility. That same afternoon, I received 2 more official HOA notices, one about a small tool shed in my backyard, barely visible from the street, and another accusing me of non-compliant decorative objects, referencing my bird feeder. Again, anonymous complaints. I began documenting everything, taking time-stamped photos of my yard, recording when lights were on or off, even measuring my grass with a ruler to stay within their absurd limits. But it didn't help. The complaints just kept coming. I reached out to the HOA board and asked for clarification on who was submitting these grievances. I was told they were anonymous per HOA policy, but that the board had to respond to consistent concerns from long-standing residents. And guess who happened to be a board member? Karen. At this point, I had received 17 formal HOA complaints in less than 3 months. 17. Every one more ridiculous than the last. One claimed I was operating a business out of my garage because I was refinishing furniture as a hobby. Another said my patio chairs were unapproved materials. Yet another accused me of having an unlicensed pet, which turned out to be a stray cat that liked to nap on my porch. The harassment was relentless, and the kicker came when I received a final warning about multiple infractions, threatening legal action or fines if I didn't resolve everything within 2 weeks. The most disturbing part? Attached to one of the complaints were photos, not just from the street, but from inside my backyard. One showed my grill, another a corner of my covered porch, and one looked directly into my living room through a slightly ajar curtain. These weren't drone shots or accidental snapshots. They were deliberate, close-up photos taken by someone who had physically entered my property. My blood ran cold. I had a fully fenced yard with a locked gate. No one should have been able to get in without me knowing. That was the moment I stopped trying to be nice. I knew now that someone, and all signs pointed to Karen, was trespassing and spying on me. I considered calling the police, but I had no hard evidence, just a gut feeling, a stack of violations, and a few creepy photos. So I took matters into my own hands. That evening, I went online and ordered a set of hidden security cameras, 2 disguised as birdhouses, 1 as a rock, and a few small infrared cams with night vision. I installed them covertly the next day, placing them near the back gate, under the porch eaves, and along the side of the house. I made sure to angle them to capture movement near windows, gates, and fence lines, without being too obvious. I also set them to record only when motion was detected and to alert my phone silently. Then I waited. I kept my routine the same. Watering the plants, working on furniture in the garage, sitting on the porch with coffee. Every evening, I reviewed the footage. For 3 nights, there was nothing. Then, on the 4th night, just after 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected in the backyard. My heart pounded as I opened the app, half expecting a raccoon or stray cat. But it wasn't an animal. It was a human silhouette, short, slender, wearing a hoodie and gloves, slipping quietly through the side gate. She had a flashlight and a phone, and she moved quickly, like she'd done this before. She stopped near the flower bed, crouched down to take photos, then crept up the back steps, peered into my living room window, and turned to leave. I froze. Even without zooming in, I could recognize her walk, her posture, the way she moved. It was Karen. I didn't sleep that night. I saved the footage to 3 separate drives, timestamped it, and backed it up to cloud storage. The next day, I reviewed older motion clips and saw nothing new, but the 4th night confirmed everything I'd suspected. Karen was not just filing complaints. She was actively sneaking into my property at night to create them. Now I had proof. But I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. I wanted to see if she'd do it again. I told no one, acted normal, even waved at her when we passed on the sidewalk. A week later, she struck again, 3:11 a.m. This time, she tried the gate, which I had double-locked, then walked along the fence line before slipping through a gap on the far side I hadn't even realized was there. She tiptoed past the rock camera, and I got a clear shot of her face as she stopped under the porch light. Her hoodie slipped down just enough to reveal her unmistakable blonde bob. She took more pictures of the grill, the patio chairs, and even reached out and touched one of the hanging planters. That was enough. I wasn't just being harassed anymore, I was being stalked. I had undeniable proof, and it was time to act. But first, I had to make sure I wasn't the only one dealing with this nightmare. So I knocked on a few doors, starting with my neighbor across the street, a retired veteran who'd lived in the neighborhood for 20 years. When I explained my situation and showed him a still frame from the footage, he looked shocked, but not surprised. "She's done this before," he said. "Filed bogus complaints about my flagpole. Said it was too tall. Tried to get my Christmas lights banned last year." One by one, I spoke to other neighbors. Each had a story. One woman had been fined for having too many potted plants on her front porch. Another family had received warnings for excessive laughter during birthday parties. But none had camera footage like mine. I realized Karen had made herself judge, jury, and executioner of the neighborhood under the guise of protecting the community standards, and the HOA board, likely out of laziness or fear, had allowed it. But no more. I compiled a report, wrote a formal complaint, included photo evidence, timestamps, and a summary of each incident. I filed a police report for trespassing and submitted the footage. Then, I requested a special meeting with the HOA board, CCING their legal representative, and attaching the video files. Karen might have controlled the board with her manipulative charm and relentless pressure, but once the truth was out, she would have no place to hide. This wasn't just about stopping the complaints anymore. This was about exposing the obsessive, entitled behavior of a